The old chess club on Maple Street had a certain charm that kept drawing Nora back week after week. Tonight, the warm glow of vintage lamps cast shadows across wooden tables where players hunched over their boards in deep thought. The familiar scent of coffee and old books filled the air as quiet murmurs and the occasional click of chess pieces provided the evening soundtrack. Nora slipped in through the side door, as she always did, hoping not to draw attention. At 32, she had mastered the art of blending into backgrounds. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her clothes practical and unremarkable. She carried a worn leather bag containing a book on number theory, light reading for when the chess matches grew predictable. "Evening, Nora," whispered Mr. Chen, the elderly club manager who seemed to notice everything despite his failing eyesight. "Your usual spot is free." She smiled and nodded her thanks, making her way to the corner table partially hidden by a bookshelf. It offered the perfect vantage point to observe most of the room while remaining somewhat hidden. Nora had been coming to this club for nearly 8 months since moving to the city for her new position at the university, but few members knew anything substantial about her beyond her name. As a research mathematician specializing in game theory, Nora spent her days surrounded by complex equations and theoretical models. Chess was different, a beautiful escape that connected her to memories of her grandfather's kitchen table, where she'd learned to play at just 4 years old. He would have loved this place, she thought, setting down her bag and settling into the worn chair. Nora had never pursued chess professionally, though her grandfather had urged her to consider it. "You see patterns others miss," he'd told her countless times. But her path had led to mathematics instead, and chess remained her private joy, a connection to him that felt too personal to share widely. She watched a game between two middle-aged men, noting the interesting knight maneuver one player had just executed. It wasn't the standard approach in that position, but it created fascinating complications. Nora mentally played out the possible continuations, her mind automatically calculating variations several moves deep. The gentle hum of the club suddenly shifted as the front door swung open with unnecessary force. Conversations paused, and heads turned toward the disruption. 3 men entered, their confident strides and loud voices immediately changing the atmosphere. "Looks like we found where all the action happens on Tuesday nights," announced the man in front, his voice carrying throughout the room. Even without recognizing his face, Nora would have known who he was from his demeanor alone. Pavel Sokolov, international Grandmaster, 4-time national champion, and recently featured on the cover of Chess World magazine. His reputation preceded him, brilliant at the board and insufferable away from it. Mr. Chen hurried forward, clearly flustered by the presence of such chess royalty in his humble club. "Grandmaster Sokolov, what an unexpected honor. We had no idea you were in town." Sokolov smiled, clearly enjoying the stir his arrival had caused. "Just passing through. Thought I'd see what the local talent looks like." His accent gave his words a sharp edge. He was tall, perhaps in his early 40s, with calculating eyes that seemed to evaluate everything and everyone in terms of their utility to him. His 2 companions, younger men Nora recognized as rising players on the tournament circuit, flanked him like courtiers, laughing at his every remark. "We've got the regional semifinals tomorrow," Sokolov continued, scanning the room dismissively. "Needed to kill some time tonight." The regular club members murmured with excitement. For many amateur players, the chance to see a grandmaster, in person, let alone in their own club, was a rare thrill. Several people abandoned their games, gravitating toward the newcomers. "Would you consider giving a short lecture, perhaps? Or maybe a simultaneous exhibition?" Mr. Chen asked hopefully. Sokolov shrugged. "Not really in the mood for teaching beginners tonight." His gaze continued to roam the room, taking in the mismatched chairs, the worn chess sets, the plain walls, decorated with faded tournament posters. "But I might play a game or two if anyone here thinks they can give me a challenge." His companions smirked at this. One of them, a lanky young man with a perpetual sneer, whispered something that made Sokolov laugh. "Actually," Sokolov added, his voice louder now, Let's make it interesting. I'll play anyone here and remove my queen at the start. Should make it sporting at least. Giving queen odds was the ultimate insult in chess, suggesting your opponent needed a massive head start to even have a chance. Several of the club's stronger players looked offended but remained silent, knowing that even with such a handicap, the Grandmaster would likely demolish them. From her corner, Nora continued, observing, feeling a familiar tightness in her chest. Men like Sokolov existed in every field, talented but arrogant, using their gifts to dominate rather than elevate those around them. She'd encountered similar personalities in academia and had learned to avoid them when possible. Mr. Chen looked uncomfortable. Perhaps we should— No takers, Sokolov interrupted, spreading his hands theatrically. Come now, it's not every day you get to play a Grandmaster. Even with your queen, I'll still beat you, but you might learn something. His gaze continued surveying the room until it landed on Nora's corner. Something about her separate position, her quietness amid the commotion, seemed to draw his attention. Their eyes met briefly before she looked away, back to the abandoned game she'd been analyzing. How about you hiding in the corner? Sokolov called out, pointing directly at her. Fancy a game with a Grandmaster? The room went quiet. All heads turned toward Nora, who felt her privacy shatter under their collective gaze. She shook her head slightly, hoping he would move on to someone else. Instead, Sokolov began walking toward her table, his companions trailing behind like a small entourage. Don't be shy, he said, his tone somewhere between encouraging and mocking. I promise. I won't use all my Grandmaster powers. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down uninvited. Up close, his presence was even more imposing, a mix of expensive cologne, absolute confidence, and the subtle intensity that seemed to radiate from truly elite chess players. I'm just here to watch, Nora said quietly, meeting his gaze. I'm sure others would appreciate the opportunity more. Nonsense, Sokolov replied, already reaching for the chess set on her table. Everyone wants to play the Grandmaster. It'll be a story to tell your friends. He winked at her. I'll even give you a special handicap since you look nervous. His two companions had positioned themselves behind him, arms crossed, amused smiles on their faces as they prepared to witness what they assumed would be a quick demolition. Nora felt a flicker of something she hadn't experienced in years, a competitive spark her grandfather had nurtured, but that she'd kept carefully contained. She glanced around at the expectant faces of the club members and realized there was no graceful way to refuse without creating more of a scene. Fine, she said with a small sigh. One game. Sokolov grinned triumphantly. That's the spirit. He began setting up the pieces with practiced efficiency. White or black? It doesn't matter, Nora replied, her voice still quiet but steady. Such confidence. He laughed, turning the board so she had the white pieces. You get white, first move advantage. And as promised. He dramatically removed his queen from the board and set it aside with a flourish. The queen stays off. Should make things interesting. By now, a crowd had gathered around their table, whispers and murmurs creating a soft backdrop to the tension building between them. Mr. Chen hovered nearby, looking concerned about the situation but unwilling to intervene. Sokolov's friends had pulled up chairs, making comments in Russian that Nora couldn't understand but whose dismissive tone was perfectly clear. One of them snapped photos with his phone. For social media, he explained with a smirk. People love seeing the master play against. He gestured vaguely at Nora. Sokolov leaned forward slightly. What's your name? For the post. Nora, she answered simply, arranging her pieces with methodical precision. No last name? No title? Just Nora? He pressed. She looked up at him, her hazel eyes meeting his. Just Nora is fine. Something in her steady gaze made Sokolov pause momentarily. Then he shrugged. Well, just Nora, let's see what you've got. Don't worry if you make mistakes. It's not every day you play someone of my caliber. As Nora placed her final pawn in position, memories washed over her. Afternoons with her grandfather, his patient guidance, the countless games they'd played on a board very much like this one. She remembered his words from long ago. Chess isn't about intimidating your opponent, little one. It's about the beauty of ideas expressed through pieces on a board. Sokolov checked his watch. Shall we use a clock, or would that be too much pressure? Clock is fine, Nora replied, surprising him slightly with her readiness. Mr. Chen hurried to provide a digital chess clock, which Sokolov set for a rapid game, 15 minutes per side. Ready to begin? Sokolov asked with exaggerated courtesy. Nora nodded, her hand hovering over her king's pawn as the room around them faded into background noise. For the first time that evening, a hint of a smile touched her lips. Ready, she said. As her fingers closed around the pawn, no one in the room, least of all the Grandmaster, could have guessed what was about to unfold across the 64 squares between them. The first move of a chess game often reveals little about a player's true strength. Nora's opening, sliding her king's pawn forward 2 squares, was standard, unremarkable. Sokolov responded quickly, almost carelessly, as if to emphasize how little thought he needed to give this match. Classical opening, he commented. Good choice for beginners. Simple plans, clear strategies. Nora made no reply, her focus entirely on the board. The crowd around them had grown, with nearly everyone in the club now watching their game. Some stood on tiptoes to see over others' shoulders, while a few older members had dragged chairs to create a second row of spectators. Sokolov continued making his moves rapidly, accompanying each with a running commentary, clearly meant to unsettle her. In this position, most club players make the mistake of developing the bishop too early, he explained loudly, as Nora considered her 4th move. But you're going to avoid that trap, aren't you? When she moved her knight instead, he nodded, with exaggerated approval. See, she listens. That's the first step to improvement. His companions chuckled on cue, their phones continuing to capture photos and short videos. One whispered something that made Sokolov smirk as he glanced at Nora. My friend says you look too serious, he translated. Chess should be fun, especially when you have nothing to lose. The early moves progressed quickly, both players developing their pieces toward the center of the board. To casual observers, the game appeared fairly balanced, despite Sokolov missing his queen. But more experienced players in the audience began exchanging puzzled glances. There was something unusual about the quiet woman's play, a purposefulness that seemed at odds with Sokolov's assessment of her as a novice. By the 10th move, a subtle shift occurred in the atmosphere around the table. Sokolov's commentary grew less frequent, his movements less theatrical. He leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing as he studied the position with more genuine attention. Nora had developed her pieces efficiently, creating a harmonious structure that controlled key squares. More notably, she had steered the game away from open tactical exchanges where Sokolov's greater experience might prevail, instead creating a closed position rich with strategic possibilities. Interesting choice, Sokolov muttered, more to himself than to her when she exchanged a knight for his bishop, slightly damaging his pawn structure. Mr. Chen, who had been watching with growing interest, whispered to a longtime club member, "She's actually quite good, isn't she?" "Better than good," the man replied quietly. "Look at her pawn structure compared to his." Sokolov overheard this exchange, and a flash of irritation crossed his face. He drummed his fingers on the table once, then made his next move with more deliberation. "Let's pick up the pace a bit," he suggested, glancing at the clock. "We don't want to bore our audience." Nora nodded slightly but maintained her measured tempo, taking the time she needed for each decision. Her movements were economical. No wasted motion, no dramatic gestures, just the quiet precision of someone completely at home with the pieces. On move 14, she initiated a complex exchange in the center that resulted in her gaining a small, positional advantage. It wasn't obvious to everyone watching, but Sokolov recognized it immediately. His eyebrows drew together in a brief frown before he smoothed his expression back to casual confidence. "Well played," he acknowledged, his tone slightly different now, less patronizing, more genuine. You've clearly done this before. Nora offered a small smile but remained silent, already planning her next sequence of moves. One of Sokolov's companions leaned down to whisper in his ear, looking slightly concerned. The Grandmaster shook his head dismissively, but his relaxed demeanor had noticeably diminished. By move 18, the nature of the contest had transformed entirely. What began as a casual exhibition, a Grandmaster toying with an amateur, had become a serious chess match. Sokolov was now giving the position his full attention, his theatrical comments abandoned. The crowd sensed this shift. Whispers circulated through the group. Who is she? Does anyone know her rating? I've never seen her play a serious game here before. Mr. Chen moved closer to the table, his earlier anxiety replaced by growing excitement. Something extraordinary was happening in his humble chess club tonight. Sokolov's eyes met Nora's across the board after she completed a particularly insightful maneuver that threatened to win a pawn. You're clearly underrated, he said, his voice lower now meant only for her. What's your actual playing strength? Nora's response was simply to gesture toward the board, indicating it was still his move. He studied the position with renewed intensity, realizing that despite giving away his queen, he now faced genuine pressure. Without his strongest piece, the small positional advantages Nora had accumulated were becoming significant problems. Check, Nora said quietly, as she slid her bishop diagonally across the board to threaten his king. A murmur ran through the crowd. The quiet woman had just put a Grandmaster in check. Sokolov had only one legal move to escape the check, and it forced him to further weaken his position. He made it quickly, but with a tightness around his mouth that hadn't been there. Earlier, 2 moves later, Nora sacrificed a knight in what appeared at first glance to be a serious blunder. Several onlookers gasped, thinking she'd finally made the mistake Sokolov had been waiting for. The Grandmaster himself reached toward the knight, then hesitated, his hand hovering as he calculated the consequences. His eyes darted across the board, mentally playing out the possible variations. Trap, he muttered, withdrawing his hand without capturing the piece. But it was too late. Whether he took the knight or not, Nora had created a situation where every continuation favored her. The sacrifice wasn't a blunder, but a brilliant strategic decision that revealed the true depth of her chess understanding. One of Sokolov's companions, who had been smirking throughout most of the game, now looked genuinely shocked. He showed his phone to the other companion, pointing at something on the screen. Excuse me, he said, addressing Nora directly for the first time, his accent heavy. Your full name, please? Nora looked up briefly, then returned her attention to the board. Not relevant to our game, she replied. Sokolov was no longer paying attention to this exchange. His entire focus had narrowed to the chess position before him, which was rapidly deteriorating despite his considerable skill. Without his queen, the compounding small advantages Nora had accumulated were becoming overwhelming. On move 27, he spent nearly 3 full minutes considering his options before making a move that, while not objectively bad, indicated he was now playing defensively, trying to hold his position together rather than pressing for victory. You could have been titled, he said, not as a question but as a conclusion he'd reached. Nora's hand hovered briefly over her rook before completing a precise move that further consolidated her advantage. Maybe, she acknowledged, breaking her near silence. The chess club had grown completely quiet. Even those who couldn't fully appreciate the technical brilliance of Nora's play could sense that something remarkable was unfolding. Mr. Chen had begun recording the moves on a score sheet, his hand shaking slightly with excitement. By move 30, Sokolov's position was objectively lost, though the remaining complications meant it might take another 15 or 20 moves to convert the advantage to a win. In tournament play, a Grandmaster would typically fight until the bitter end, making his opponent prove their technique. But this wasn't a tournament. Sokolov studied the board one final time, then did something that sent another shockwave through the assembled crowd. He extended his hand across the board. I resign, he said simply. Well played. A collective gasp rose from the onlookers, followed by stunned silence. A Grandmaster, even without his queen, conceding to an unknown player at a local chess club was beyond unexpected. It was almost unthinkable. Nora hesitated before taking his offered hand. Their handshake was brief but firm. "Thank you for the game," she said. Sokolov nodded, his expression a complex mixture of surprise, respect, and lingering disbelief. "Who are you, really?" he asked as he began to reset the pieces. Before Nora could respond, Mr. Chen stepped forward, clutching his score sheet with trembling hands. "That was magnificent," he said, his voice quavering with excitement. "Would you mind if I posted this game on the club website? With your permission, of course." Sokolov's companions had moved closer, one of them still staring at his phone screen with intensity. "I think I know," said one, turning his phone so Sokolov could see the screen. "Look familiar?" The Grandmaster glanced at whatever was displayed, then looked back at Nora with new understanding dawning on his face. "Now I remember," he said slowly. "Bulgaria, Junior Championships, about 15 years ago. You weren't called Nora then." The crowd leaned in collectively, sensing that the mystery of the quiet woman was about to be revealed. Nora slipped her hand into her bag and pulled out her book on number theory, as if preparing to leave. "That was a long time ago," she said, softly. "Another life." Mr. Chen looked between them, confusion evident on his face. "What is it? Who is she?" Sokolov leaned back in his chair, a genuine smile replacing his earlier arrogance. "Our friend here," he said, gesturing toward Nora with newfound respect, "has been keeping secrets from your little club." A heavy silence hung over the chess club as everyone waited for Nora to respond to Sokolov's revelation. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, her eyes fixed on the chess pieces rather than the faces now studying her with renewed interest. "You were Elena Petrova back then," Sokolov continued, the name triggering immediate reactions from several serious chess players in the crowd. "Bulgarian junior champion at 13. Everyone expected you to become one of the top women players in the world." Mr. Chen's mouth fell open. "Elena Petrova? But she disappeared from chess over a decade ago." Nora, or Elena, sighed softly. "I didn't disappear. I just chose a different path." "But why?" someone in the crowd asked. "You were brilliant." She finally looked up, her expression a mixture of discomfort at the attention and something else. Perhaps relief that her secret was out. "Life offers many games to play," she said simply. "Chess was just one of them." Sokolov leaned forward, genuine curiosity replacing his earlier arrogance. "You could have been a Grandmaster yourself. I remember watching your games. Your victory against Kozlov was particularly beautiful. You remember that?" A flicker of surprise crossed her face. "Of course. It was a masterpiece of positional play. Everyone was talking about it." His tone had completely transformed. This was now one chess player speaking to another with professional respect. "Then suddenly you were gone. No tournaments, no appearances." One of Sokolov's companions had been busily scrolling through his phone. "Look," he said, turning the screen toward the others. "Junior World Championship 2010, Elena Petrova, 3rd place overall." The screen showed a teenage girl holding a trophy, her serious expression already hinting at the woman she would become. The crowd began to buzz with excitement. Having a former chess prodigy among them was unexpected enough. Having her defeat a Grandmaster after years away from competitive play was extraordinary. "But I don't understand," Mr. Chen said, still trying to process this revelation. "You've been coming here for months just to watch?" "I needed a quiet place," she replied, "somewhere I could enjoy chess without pressure." Sokolov studied her with newfound fascination. "And now you're a mathematician?" "I work at the university." She gathered her belongings, clearly uncomfortable being the center of attention. "Research in game theory and decision analysis." "So, you traded one kind of game for another," Sokolov observed thoughtfully. She nodded. "In a way." The second companion, who had remained quiet until now, suddenly spoke up. "Wait, Elena Petrova, Didn't she become a woman international master before she stopped competing? Yes, Sokolov confirmed. At 15, if I remember correctly. One of the youngest ever. The growing commotion had attracted the attention of everyone in the club. People who had been in the back room playing blitz games now crowded forward, asking what was happening. As whispered explanations rippled through the crowd, more eyes turned toward Nora with expressions ranging from awe to disbelief. "Would you consider playing in tournaments again?" someone called out. Nora shook her head. "I haven't played seriously in years." "That game looked pretty serious to me," Sokolov said with a wry smile, gesturing to the board between them. A tentative smile touched her lips. "Perhaps I've played a little at home, online sometimes. More than a little, I'd say." His tone was respectful now, the mocking edge completely gone. "Your calculation is as sharp as ever." Mr. Chen, having recovered from his initial shock, was now practically bouncing with excitement. "This is the most remarkable thing to happen at our club in 20 years. We must celebrate. Elena, or do you prefer Nora now?" "Nora, please," she confirmed. "Elena Petrova feels like someone from another lifetime." "Nora it is," Mr. Chen agreed. "This calls for something special. I have a bottle of good brandy in my office that I've been saving for a special occasion." As Mr. Chen hurried away, the crowd began to press closer. Many people eager to speak with this newly revealed chess prodigy. The sudden attention was clearly overwhelming for someone who had carefully maintained her anonymity for so long. Sokolov noticed her discomfort, and, in a surprising display of sensitivity, stood up to create a buffer between Nora and the excited club members. "Give her some space, everyone," he said, using his commanding presence to good effect. "Good chess players are like good wine. They deserve to breathe." His intervention gave Nora a moment to compose herself. She took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders slightly. "Thank you," she said quietly to Sokolov as the crowd reluctantly gave them some room. He nodded, then asked the question that was clearly foremost in his mind. "Why did you stop competing? You had such promise." The club fell silent again, everyone eager to hear her answer. Nora's fingers traced the edge of the chessboard thoughtfully. "My grandfather died," she said finally. "He was the one who taught me chess, who took me to tournaments when my parents couldn't. After he was gone..." She paused. The joy of it changed. "I'm sorry," Sokolov said, and seemed to genuinely mean it. "It wasn't just that," she continued. "There was also the pressure. Everyone had expectations. Coaches, the federation, sponsors. What tournaments I should play, how I should prepare, who I should train with. Chess began to feel like a job rather than a passion." Sokolov finished for her, understanding in his voice. "Exactly." She looked at him with surprise, as if not expecting him to comprehend so easily. He shrugged. "I've been there. Not everyone who feels that way has the courage to walk away, though." "It wasn't courage," Nora corrected him gently. "Mathematics offered me a different kind of beauty, with different kinds of problems to solve." I followed. What fascinated me? Mr. Chen returned with a dusty bottle and a tray of small glasses. "Here we are. A toast to our hidden champion." As he began pouring, Sokolov's phone buzzed. He checked it and frowned. "My coach," he explained. "Wondering where I am. We have an early start tomorrow for the tournament." "You should go," Nora said. "Important not to disrupt your preparation routine." He hesitated, clearly torn between professional obligations and the fascinating discovery of a long-lost chess talent. "I'd like to talk more," he said finally. "About your games, your approach. There's much I could learn from you." Coming from a Grandmaster of his stature, this was an extraordinary admission. Several club members exchanged astonished glances. "Perhaps another time," Nora suggested. "After your tournament." Sokolov nodded and reached for his coat. "I'd like that." He turned to address the whole club. "I apologize for my behavior earlier. It was unworthy of the game we all love." This unexpected humility from a man known for his ego prompted murmurs of surprise throughout the room. "Will you at least stay for one toast?" Mr. Chen asked, offering filled glasses to both Nora and Sokolov. Sokolov checked his watch, then nodded. One quick toast. Everyone who could fit a glass on the tray took one, while others raised coffee cups or water bottles. To chess, Mr. Chen proposed, which brings together people from all walks of life and reveals our true characters across 64 squares. To chess, the room echoed, glasses clinking. As they drank, Nora found herself the recipient of smiles and nods of respect from people who had barely noticed her before tonight. The anonymity she had carefully maintained was gone, replaced by a new kind of attention that felt both familiar and strange. When Sokolov and his companions prepared to leave, he paused beside her chair. "Our game isn't over, you know," he said, quietly. She looked up at him questioningly. "The real game," he clarified. "The one that begins when we understand our opponent is worthy." He extended his hand. "Until next time, Nora Petrova." She took his hand, a genuine smile finally warming her features. "Until next time, Grandmaster." After they left, the club erupted into excited discussions. Everyone wanted to talk to Nora, to hear about her past victories, to understand her approach to the game. Some pulled out phones to search for her old tournament games. Others asked if she would consider giving lessons. Amidst the commotion, Mr. Chen settled into the chair Sokolov had vacated. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "in the 15 years I've run this club, I've never seen anything quite like tonight." "I'm sorry for not being honest about who I was," Nora replied. He waved away her apology. "We all come to chess with our own stories, our own reasons, but I am curious. Why come to a club at all if you wanted to stay anonymous? Why not just play online?" Nora's gaze swept across the room, taking in the worn tables, the mismatched chairs, the old-fashioned chess sets with their slightly yellowed, white pieces. "Because chess isn't just a game played on a board," she said softly. "It's also about the people, the places, the atmosphere." Her fingers brushed against the wooden knight piece. "My grandfather always said that a chess club is where the soul of the game lives." Mr. Chen's eyes grew misty. "Your grandfather was a wise man." "Yes," she agreed. "He was." Outside the window, streetlights illuminated falling snow, creating a peaceful backdrop to the warmth and excitement inside the club. For the first time in many years, Nora felt something reawaken. A connection to the game that had once defined her life, and perhaps might again, though in a different way than before. The next morning, Nora woke to the soft ping of her phone. Squinting at the screen, she found 17 notifications, an unusual occurrence for someone whose social media presence was practically non-existent. Propping herself up against her pillows, she scrolled through the alerts with growing astonishment. Her inbox contained messages from former chess acquaintances she hadn't spoken to in years. There were friend requests from club members who had barely acknowledged her presence before last night. Most surprisingly, there was an email from the National Chess Federation. "What on earth?" she muttered, opening the Federation email first. It was a formal invitation to participate in the upcoming Women's National Championship as a special guest player. The Federation director mentioned how excited the chess community would be to welcome back Elena Petrova after her long absence. Nora set the phone down and stared at the ceiling, trying to process how quickly her carefully constructed privacy had unraveled. One game against a Grandmaster, and suddenly she was thrust back into a world she had deliberately stepped away from years ago. Her phone pinged again. This time it was a text from Mr. Chen. "Have you seen the chess forums this morning? You're trending. Also, several members have asked if you would consider teaching at the club." Before she could reply, another message arrived, this one from a number she didn't recognize. "Your queen's sacrifice was brilliant. Our game is all over chess websites. We need to talk. Sokolov." Nora dropped her phone as if it had burned her. Queen's sacrifice? There had been no queen sacrifice in their game. Sokolov had removed his queen at the start as a handicap. Unless... She grabbed her laptop and navigated to the major chess news sites. Sure enough, the top story on Chess Network featured the headline, "Mystery Woman Defeats Grandmaster Sokolov with Stunning Queen Sacrifice." The article below included a full replay of their game, but with a critical difference. Instead of Sokolov removing his queen as a handicap, the notation showed Nora sacrificing her queen on move 12 in a brilliant combination that led to a forced win 20 moves later. "He changed the game," she whispered, a mixture of disbelief and something else, admiration perhaps, washing over her. Sokolov had rewritten their encounter to protect his reputation, but he'd done so in a way that showcased her skill rather than diminishing it. The comment section under the article was filled with chess enthusiasts analyzing her queen sacrifice, praising the strategic depth and calculating ability required to see so many moves ahead. Some recognized her name from her junior career and speculated about her return to competitive chess. As Nora scrolled through the reactions, another email notification appeared, this one from her department chair at the university. "Nora, I had no idea we had a chess celebrity in our mathematics department. Several colleagues sent me links this morning. Would you consider giving a special lecture on the connections between chess and game theory for our students? It could be wonderful outreach for the department." She closed her laptop and took a deep breath. The quiet life she had built over the past decade, focused on research, teaching, and occasional anonymous chess games, had been upended overnight. Her doorbell rang, startling her from these thoughts. Looking through the peephole, she was surprised to see Mr. Chen standing in the hallway, clutching a paper bag and looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Mr. Chen?" she said, opening the door. "Is everything all right?" "I hope you don't mind the intrusion," he said, bowing slightly. "I remembered you mentioned living in this building once, and the doorman is a club member's cousin." He trailed off, seeming to realize he might be overstepping. "It's fine," Nora assured him, though she made a mental note to be more careful about personal details in the future. "Would you like to come in?" Mr. Chen stepped into her small apartment, his eyes immediately drawn to the bookshelves lining one wall, a mixture of advanced mathematics texts and chess books, some of which were rare editions. "I brought breakfast," he said, holding up the Yai paper bag. "Traditional pork buns from the shop near the club and tea." "That's very kind," Nora said, genuinely touched by the gesture. She cleared space at her small dining table while Mr. Chen unpacked the food. "I want to apologize," he said as they sat down, "for the commotion last night, and for how quickly word has spread." "It's not your fault," Nora replied, accepting a steaming bun. "In the age of smartphones and chess apps, it was bound to happen eventually if I kept playing, even casually. Still," Mr. Chen insisted, "your privacy was important to you, and now I have to decide what to do next," she finished for him. They ate in companionable silence for a moment before Mr. Chen spoke again. "May I ask you something that has puzzled me since last night?" Nora nodded. "Why did you choose our little club? With your background, you could have gone anywhere. Stronger clubs with titled players, university teams, private chess circles." She considered the question carefully before answering. "Your club reminded me of where I learned to play as a child. Not fancy or prestigious, just people who love the game." She smiled faintly. "There's an authenticity to places like yours that gets lost in more competitive environments." Mr. Chen beamed with pride. "That is perhaps the finest compliment our club has ever received. Plus," Nora added with unexpected humor, "no one recognized me, until last night." "Ah, yes." Mr. Chen's expression turned apologetic again. "About that the tournament Sokolov is playing in starts today. Several reporters are covering it, and they've been calling the club asking about you." Nora groaned. "What did you tell them?" "Only that you are a private person who happened to play a good game." He hesitated. "But there's something else. The video." "Video?" Nora's stomach tightened. "One of Sokolov's friends recorded your game and posted it online. It has thousands of views already." Nora set down her tea with a shaky hand. "I see. What will you do?" Mr. Chen asked gently. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed with another text from Sokolov. "Need to speak with you before my first round. Important. Coffee at Winston's across from tournament venue. 30 minutes?" She stared at the message, torn between curiosity and the desire to retreat from this sudden invasion of her carefully constructed life. "I think," she said slowly, "I need to have a conversation with a certain Grandmaster." Winston's cafe was busy with the morning rush. When Nora arrived, she spotted Sokolov immediately, hunched over a chessboard in the corner, his tournament lanyard hanging around his neck. He looked up as she approached, genuine relief crossing his features. "You came," he said, standing to pull out a chair for her. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," she admitted, sitting down. "I saw what you did with the game notation." Sokolov had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "About that? You turned your queen handicap into my queen sacrifice," she interrupted. "Why?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It started as self-protection, I admit. A grandmaster losing to an unrated player is embarrassing enough. Losing after giving queen odds would be career-damaging. So you rewrote history." "I rewrote the story, not your brilliance," he corrected. "The moves after the sacrifice are exactly as we played them. Your win was legitimate and impressive." A waiter appeared with 2 coffees. Sokolov thanked him and pushed 1 cup toward Nora. "I ordered for you. Black, no sugar, chess player's fuel." She accepted with a small nod, studying his face. The arrogance from the previous night was gone, replaced by something more complex. Respect mixed with what appeared to be genuine contrition. "I owe you an apology," he said, confirming her observation. "My behavior at the club was inexcusable." "Why? Did you do it?" she asked. "The grandstanding, the queen odds, all of it." Sokolov's fingers drummed lightly on the table, a nervous habit at odds with his confident public persona. "Honestly, it's become a pattern. Part of the Sokolov brand, the chess bad boy, the entertainer." He grimaced. "Sponsors love it. Crowds react to it. Social media amplifies it." Somewhere along the way, the line between the performance and the person blurred. Nora sipped her coffee, surprised by his candor. "The thing is," he continued, "that version of me, the showman, the intimidator, he's been losing a lot recently. To younger players, to new approaches, to engines that make our human mistakes look foolish." He gestured to the tournament hall visible across the street. "I'm not even seated in the top 5 here. So what do you want from me?" Nora asked directly. Sokolov met her gaze. "Help me prepare for today's rounds. Be my second." Her eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Your second?" "We played 1 game. 1 game that showed me you see patterns I miss, approaches I wouldn't consider." He leaned forward intently. "For years I've worked with the same coaches, the same seconds, the same computers. But you play differently. Creatively. The way we all did before engines told us which moves are best." "I haven't studied openings or endgames in years," Nora protested. "I'm completely out of date with modern theory." "That's exactly what I need," Sokolov insisted. "Fresh eyes, uncontaminated by the current orthodoxy." She hesitated, torn between her desire to remain uninvolved and a surprising flicker of interest at the proposition. It had been years since she'd engaged with chess at this level. "Just for today," he pressed. "After my games, we can discuss what you want to do about your sudden fame." A hint of his usual smirk returned. "Or infamous anonymity, if you prefer. And if I refuse, then I'll release a statement clarifying that I gave you queen odds and still lost fairly." His expression turned serious. "I've already drafted it in case you said no." Nora studied him, reassessing everything she thought she knew about Pavel. Sokolov. Perhaps there was more to the Grandmaster than his public persona suggested. "One day," she agreed finally, "as your second. And then we discuss how to handle all of this." She gestured vaguely, encompassing the unexpected complications that had erupted in her life. Sokolov nodded, visible relief washing over his features. "Thank you." He pushed the chessboard between them. "I'm playing Rodriguez in the first round. He always opens with the Sicilian defense." As they bent over the board, analyzing positions and discussing strategies, Nora felt a long dormant part of herself awakening, the focused, competitive mind that had once made her a prodigy. She had forgotten how it felt to immerse herself completely in the beautiful complexities of chess at its highest levels. Across the street, tournament officials were putting final touches on the playing hall. In a few hours, Sokolov would face his first opponent, carrying strategies they had crafted together. And Nora, after years in the shadows, would take her first small step back into the chess world that had once been her home. 6 months later, the annual City Chess Championship was underway in the grand ballroom of the Central Library. What had once been a modest local event had transformed into something much more significant this year, with television cameras, online streaming, and chess enthusiasts from across the country in attendance. The reason for this unprecedented interest stood calmly near the tournament director's table. Nora Petrova, reviewing the pairings for the final round. "Nervous?" asked Mr. Chen, who had appeared at her side with 2 cups of tea. Nora accepted one with a grateful smile. "Not about the chess," she replied. "The cameras are another matter." Mr. Chen chuckled. "You're doing remarkably well for someone who spent years avoiding attention. The children's workshop yesterday was particularly wonderful." "That was the easy part," Nora said, watching a group of young players practicing with the special teaching sets she had designed. "Children just want to learn the game, not interview me about my mysterious disappearance or triumphant return." The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of change for Nora, after serving as Sokolov's second for that first tournament, where he had performed far better than his seeding suggested. She had gradually reconnected with the chess world on her own terms. Rather than jumping back into competitive play as many had pressured her to do, she had chosen a different path. Working with Mr. Chen and the university, she had established a chess education program that combined her mathematical background with her chess knowledge. 3 afternoons a week, she taught chess to children from local schools, focusing particularly on encouraging young girls to embrace the game. "Your next interview is in 20 minutes, Mr. Chen reminded her, consulting the schedule on his tablet. "With chess today?" Nora nodded, taking a sip of her tea. "Remind me again why I agreed to all this publicity?" "Because," came a familiar voice behind them, "you finally realized that hiding your light under a bushel was a disservice to the game." They turned to find Sokolov approaching, dressed in his tournament best despite not competing today. After their unlikely alliance during that first tournament, they had developed an equally unlikely friendship. The arrogant Grandmaster and the reclusive former prodigy had found common ground in their deep love for chess, even as their approaches to the game, and to life, remained distinctly different. "That sounds suspiciously like something you would think, not me," Nora replied with a small smile. Sokolov shrugged unapologetically. "Perhaps we've influenced each other. You've certainly made me less intolerable, according to my coach." "A low bar to clear," she teased. Their banter was interrupted by the tournament director calling for the final round to begin in 10 minutes. Around them, players moved toward their assigned boards, making final preparations for their games. "Will you win today?" Sokolov asked, his tone more serious now. Nora glanced toward board 1, where she would face international master Thomas Lee, the tournament's top seed. "I'm not focused on winning." "Liar," Sokolov said, but fondly. "Once a competitor, always a competitor." She didn't argue the point. Her return to tournament chess had been gradual and on her own terms. She still refused to play professionally, turning down invitations to prestigious events that would have required travel and intensive preparation. Instead, she had chosen to participate in local tournaments, approaching each game as an opportunity to rediscover her love for chess rather than as battles to be won at all costs. Yet her natural talent, combined with the wisdom that came with maturity, had resulted in a string of impressive performances. Today, she stood on the verge of winning the city championship in her first attempt. "Whatever happens," Mr. Chen said warmly, "the club is planning a celebration tonight, for all you've done these past months." Nora smiled gratefully. The little chess club that had once been her anonymous refuge had become the center of a growing chess community under her guidance. Membership had tripled, young players were developing rapidly, and even some women who had never played before had begun attending her special Saturday sessions. Speaking of celebrations, Sokolov interjected, have you made a decision about the exhibition match? The exhibition match had been his idea, a high-profile charity event featuring Nora against the current women's world champion. Sponsors were already lined up, with proceeds going to support chess programs in underserved schools. I'm still thinking about it, Nora replied. It would mean stepping fully back into the spotlight, embracing a public role she had spent years avoiding. Sokolov studied her face. You know, when we first met I thought I was testing you, but you were actually testing me, and I failed rather spectacularly. You've made up for it since, she acknowledged. Perhaps, but there's something I've been wondering. He leaned closer, dropping his voice. That night at the club when I challenged you, why did you agree to play? You could have refused. The question caught her off guard. She had never fully examined her own motivations from that evening. I'm not sure, she admitted. Maybe I was tired of hiding. Or maybe you needed someone to push you back toward the board, Sokolov suggested, even if that someone was being a complete jerk about it. Before she could respond, the tournament director announced that players should take their seats. Mr. Chen gave her shoulder an encouraging squeeze before heading to help with the tournament logistics. Sokolov, however, remained by her side as she gathered her score sheet and pen. Whatever you decide about the exhibition match, he said, know that chess is better with you in it. Not because of your rating or your titles, but because of how you see the game, as something beautiful, to be shared, not just conquered. Coming from a man who had built his career on conquering opponents, this was a profound acknowledgement. Thank you, she said simply. As she turned to go to her board, he added, also, crush Lee in under 30 moves. I have money riding on it. Nora laughed, shaking her head as she walked away. Some things about Sokolov would never change. 4 hours later, as afternoon sunlight streamed through the library's high windows, Nora sat alone at her board studying the final position. Thomas Lee had played exceptionally well, pushing her to the limits of her ability. The game had gone deep into the endgame, with subtle positional nuances that would provide analysis material for weeks to come. And yet, in the end, her clarity of thought had prevailed. Lee had resigned just moments ago, standing to shake her hand with genuine respect before stepping away to give her space. Around the room, other games continued, but many spectators had been focused on board 1. Now, they applauded softly, mindful of the players still competing. Nora hardly noticed, her attention still on the final position, appreciating the harmony of her pieces, the strategic depth that had unfolded across those 64 squares. This was what she had missed during her years away. Not the victories or accolades, but these moments of pure chess beauty, when the patterns aligned in ways that felt almost transcendent. Mr. Chen approached with a bottle of water. Congratulations, champion, he said quietly, beaming with pride. Thank you. She accepted the water gratefully. It was a beautiful game. The reporter from Chess Today is waiting for your post-game interview, whenever you're ready. Nora nodded, but made no move to rise. In a moment, as Mr. Chen stepped away, her phone buzzed with an incoming text. It was from Sokolov. Magnificent endgame technique. You made it look effortless. She smiled at the message, then noticed a second text that had arrived earlier during her game. This one was from Dr. Patel, her department chair at the university. The dean approved your proposal. Joint mathematics chess research position is officially yours if you want it. No pressure to decide immediately. Nora set down her phone and looked around the tournament hall. Near the entrance, a group of young girls from her Saturday class were analyzing a position on a demonstration board, their faces intense with concentration. By the refreshment table, Sokolov was signing autographs for fans, but his eyes kept darting to her board, clearly eager to discuss her game. Mr. Chen was organizing volunteers for the awards ceremony, his whole being radiating happiness at how his humble chess club had blossomed. 6 months ago, she had been a solitary figure in the corner of that club, guarding her privacy and keeping her passion for chess carefully contained. One unexpected game had changed everything, not just bringing her back to chess, but bringing her back to a community, to a shared love of the game that transcended competition. Across the room, a young girl who had been watching her game approached, tentatively, a chess book clutched in her hands. "Excuse me, Miss Petrova, would you sign my book? Your game was amazing." Nora looked at the girl, perhaps 11 or 12, with the same serious expression she herself had worn at that age. In her eyes was that particular gleam that came from discovering the boundless possibilities of chess. "Of course," Nora said, warmly, taking the offered book. "What's your name?" "Lily. I want to be just like you someday." As Nora signed the book, she thought about the strange winding path that had led her here, from childhood prodigy to anonymous mathematician to whatever she was becoming now. Not quite a professional player, not quite a retired champion, but something new and uncharted. "Just be yourself, Lily," she said, returning the book. "That's always the best strategy." The girl beamed and ran back to her friends, the signed book, held triumphantly. Nora stood and gathered her belongings, ready for the interview, the award ceremony, and whatever came next. The future held many possibilities: the exhibition match, the new research position, expanded chess programs for the community. For the first time in years, she was genuinely excited to explore them all. As she walked toward the tournament director's table, Sokolov fell into step beside her. "So," he said with his characteristic directness, "have you decided about the exhibition match?" Nora smiled, thinking about how a chance encounter with this once arrogant man had set in motion a chain of events that had transformed her life. "Yes," she replied. "I'll play." In chess, as in life, sometimes the most unexpected moves led to the most beautiful games.